Hey, Scott Jordan here and Mark Warner for the Thursday, August 20th COVID update. That's 2020. Hey, Mark, let's get these off.
Hello there, Scott. Hello there, grand viewers. It's good to have you all here on board with us. Got
Yep.
a lot to talk about today.
Well, we got an unusual show because I don't know how everybody else is feeling, but and Mark and I talked about it ahead of time, but I've got COVID fatigue. You know what that means?
I saw it on the news. They were saying that it is the second epidemic to hit this year. Is first one COVID-19, second one is COVID fatigue.
So we were talking last week in our management group about how fortunate we've been here at Bullen that, not only do we make disinfectants and our business really wasn't affected other than it went through the roof. We haven't had any occurrences here with any employees or any family members of employees. And I think we've gotten kind of a little bit more laid back about the whole thing as we should be. So we talked as a group last week about kind of dialing our game back up again, where you should be wearing your mask, things like that. So instead of reporting on some of the stuff we've reported on before, we're kind of recap a little bit some of the things that you should do as a business and you should be helping your customers do with their business, that now that hopefully they're getting back into operational mode to kind of keep things safe. So I think that's a good preamble, wouldn't you, Mark, as to what we kind of covered last week?
Yeah, I think it's a good way of creating a summary of what we're going to chat about today. I mean, obviously, the way it's been on the news, literally, this COVID fatigue syndrome is very widespread. Yeah. And if that means that's the second pandemic of the year, and then COVID-19 is supposed to reemerge in the fall, that'll be the third. And then COVID fatigue part 2 will hit around November. That'll be the fourth pandemic in 1 year. 2020 is going to go down in history. That's for sure.
Yeah, that and Bill and Ted's Great Adventure is coming out, the sequel, part number 3.
Well, that's good to know. So we compiled a list of things that really kind of related to COVID fatigue and really why it's important for people to think about right now and not to get lax. I know one of them.
Yeah, basic stuff that they should know, but we want to kind of remind everybody.
Yeah, and one of them is we're seeing a lot of companies conducting a daily health check. Yeah. So that can involve just conversation. Some cases it involves daily written questionnaires. In some cases, specifically, I've seen it in healthcare, but in some factories and so on, they're requiring daily temperature checks as well.
Yep. We did this one. The next one on the list is conducting a hazard assessment of the workplace. We did that after our discussion last week. And came up with some concrete plans, but people think, okay, you don't have to wear a face mask in your private office, but if you go to the bathroom and you're walking through a group of people, if you're kind of laid back, you probably figure, well, I'm just going through the office. Why do I need to wear a face mask? You do need to wear a face mask. So that was one of the hazard assessments that we kind of came up with, that people were being a little bit more laid back than they should be. So
and the number one thing that people are failing to do properly is to wear face masks when they're supposed to. And not only that, but to wear them properly. I mean, wearing a face mask under your chin does not qualify as wearing a face mask. But I've seen this.
Yeah. People, they think, oh, well, I've got it covered. It's kind of around my neck. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so we covered that one. Am I next? Implementing policies and practices for social distancing. That's kind of what we just talked about, as far as walking through the office. Just because you're stopping for 10 seconds still means you got to follow protocol. So it's important stuff. I mean, this is the basics of how we kind of get through this whole thing.
Well, tied into what we did when we did the hazard assessment, obviously we're talking masks and social distancing, but part of it is to figure out if there's areas that would benefit from either plexiglass barriers
Yep.
or floor markings. And the floor markings are used to identify proper distances. And those are helpful. We're all seeing that in mini markets and grocery stores and so on.
Yep, yep. Our people at the order desk, I think I said a couple weeks ago, they use the plastic barrier between their cubicles to put Post-it notes on. So now they have a whole new working surface that they can hang stuff on. So to talk about signage, you should have signage to proclaim, what the policies are, so people are reminded of it. That's pretty simple. And CDC has all kinds of things that you can download from their website.
Even just going to the mini markets and the grocery stores, it's amazing how much signage they're using.
Yep.
And so when you think about back to work for businesses, it seems to be the protocol to follow. The other thing that's interesting, Scott, that's come up is we're seeing some companies are actually using staging areas, where if they're doing a shift change, they're trying to limit employee exposure to large groups. So a shift change might use a staging area, and it keeps small groups separated, so that as one shift, first shift changes to second shift to third shift, they use that staging area idea. And they're using that in education too. In education, it's called cohorting or potting, where they're trying to limit the size of the groups.
Yep, yep. Another one is make sure you're aware of your employees and the stress level that's involved with all this that's going on, and what's happening at home. If it's a family where there's multiple people working, like the husband and wife are working separately, one spouse might have a different situation at work versus another. So it's important to communicate with each other and talk about it. We had a similar situation here where the employee is able to work from home consistently without any effect on their performance. And there's no reason to come in if you've got that situation. It takes de-stress that whole person's issues that they have. So it's important to discuss it with people, talk about it. Yeah.
The interesting thing about that stress deal is that it can be as impactful on people that are working as it is on people that aren't working. So people that are working are dealing with a different level of stress. They're perhaps going into environments where they have to be extra cautious, but they are in many cases very grateful to have a job.
Yep.
And then you've got people that are stuck at home, they're quarantined, maybe laid off or furloughed from their job. They're dealing with being quarantined, they're dealing with the COVID stresses, and also perhaps the lack of opportunity to create income. So you put that all into the same family, and you can end up with almost a high stress level that are based on almost contradictory situations. So it can exist in a lot of different ways. The last one we had on here were things that you wouldn't normally think about. So have you really thought about how you're going to handle break rooms? Have you really thought about how you're going to handle something as simple as lunches? Is everybody bringing their lunch in? Is there a single person being used to run out to do a pickup? Things that we used to always take for granted, and now we can't take it for granted. And it really behooves an employer to put some thought into the best way to handle that, to make sure that it's accommodating everybody as much as possible.
Yeah, good point. Okay. And then one recommendation we'd pass on, and it depends a little bit on your state requirements. In Pennsylvania, we're required to have a written procedure in place. So if we do have an occurrence where somebody comes to work and is hot for COVID, you have to have something in place to be able to, what's going to happen each step of the way, how long it's going to take, how do you bring yourself back to work. So that's a requirement, and at least in Pennsylvania, that if you are going to be open for business, you have to be kind of prepared to be not open for business, I guess is a good way of putting it.
So one of the things I find missing in most people's written policies is how to handle the special Ks. What I'm referring to is the Kens and the Karens of the world. So in other words, people who feel as though they don't need to comply with the rules and regulations that everybody else has going on. Do you know a Ken? Do you know a Carol?
Well, in our case here at Bullen, I don't think we have any Ken and
Karen.
those type of situations that people just kind of forget.
Yeah.
You get kind of laid back because, again, like we started off, we haven't had any occurrences here, so it's pretty easy to let your guard down,
So
unfortunately.
I was in a supermarket the other day, and I overheard an interesting comment because I'm finding that about 95 or more percent of the people that I'm seeing in grocery stores or hardware stores are wearing masks.
Yeah.
And so I'm finding that people that are complying are almost offended by those that come in without masks or that aren't wearing them carefully, properly. And I overheard one woman say to her husband, "Hey, who doesn't wear a mask? They must have COVID." And the person overheard it and panicked and sheepishly walked away, tucking his face inside his t-shirt.
Good.
So maybe people need to be shamed into doing the right thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's kind of our recap on how to get back up to speed with what you're doing. Mark, you want to close this out with some thoughts?
Yeah. So the bottom line is, I remember 6 months ago or 5 months ago when we started talking about this, we were all pretty hopeful that it might be a 4 or 5 month deal. And there was a light at the end of the tunnel, maybe when summertime got here.
Yeah, I think that
Uh,
wasn't the sunlight supposed to kill everything off?
it was supposed
Yeah.
to, but that doesn't explain Texas and Florida or California
Yeah.
or Arizona.
Yeah.
So that kind of fell away. And I guess that means it's not going away anytime real soon.
No.
So, if you've been lucky so far, make sure you're continuously ramping your game up and not allowing yourself really to get lazy. I mean, if you think about like football, the closer you get to the end zone, the harder it is to get yardage.
Yep.
And the hardest yard is the last yard.
Yep.
So if you've been lucky so far, don't let your guard down. Now's the time to be extra vigilant. So
Yep.
that's my thoughts for the day, Scott.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for tuning in for another week of the COVID update. We'll be back again next week. Maybe the week after we might take a break since it's the week after is Labor Day, right?
Yep.
Yep. So Mark's all ready for the world. I'm
Back to work.
A couple of you noticed last week that these are Bullen face masks. Yes, that's right. We do have a supply if you're interested in getting them. Contact your, what's the term?
Account managers.
Account manager. That's right. Yep. Okay. Thanks a lot, folks. Back to work.
All right. Thanks.